is from the desert theme that Mel started last week. For those of you who don't know, I am a therapist. I work on campus, and I get to give presentations often to students. And so when asked to do this, my brain immediately goes to this presentations that I give regularly, which are around mental health and different things in life. I do have a ministry background many years ago, and so to mix and blend those worlds together. But with my students, when I give a presentation, I start just about every presentation with two main messages that are actually relevant to the passage today. So, there we go. My two main messages is, first one is, it's okay to ask for help for whatever you're dealing with to come to crisis. Firmly believe this because it's really important to make sure that we're taking care of ourselves. And then the second one is, your personal well-being is your client's greatest asset. I specifically work with a lot of veterinary students, or with the College of Veterinary Medicine, and I encourage them as helpers to take care of themselves because they're not always good at taking care of themselves, and if I can brain ninja trick them, and they're like, hey, if you take care of yourself, it's going to make you a better doctor, they might actually take care of themselves. But with that, I think we can swap out that word client for any of our callings, any of our purpose, anything that we're serving. Our personal well-being is our calling's greatest asset. And taking care of ourselves is really valid so that we can live up to that calling. So we'll come back to these after we go through the sermon. Last week, Elle started off our Lenten sermon series from the desert, talking about God encountering Moses in the desert, in the burning bush. He followed his curiosity to investigate the burning bush, and God called Moses to deliver Israel. He said, no, thank you, not for me. And then God said, no, this is for you. We have all of these things, and you are the perfect person. And he responded with his presence, saying, I am with you in this. And then he said yes to that calling. In juxtaposition today, we're talking about Moses saying no and learning to say no. Because I think that saying no is one, no is a full sentence. It's also a hard sentence to say. So I want to talk about that before we get to Exodus 18. I want to give us an update for context and clarity of what is happening. Growing up in church and all of the Sunday school, I have so many vivid memories beyond Prince of Egypt about like what was happening in Exodus. And so I had to go back and look at like, okay, where are we at? Where were the contexts? And so after Moses 3, he returns to Egypt. And then Moses and Aaron go before Pharaoh, and then Pharaoh's like, ha! Because of this, I am going to make their work harder, to make bricks without a straw. And then Moses and Aaron are like, all right, well, if you don't believe us, here's my staff that's a snake, and here's all of these cool little miracles and signs. And then he's like, no. And then the plagues happen. We got 10 plagues. 9 happen. The Passover is then introduced and celebrated. The 10th plague happens. They're released. Israel flees Egypt with that. I should have just done all this at once. Like a lot of different things. I thought it was going to be more dramatic. The pillars of cloud and fire are introduced, God's presence being with in front and behind Israel. And then God actually hardens Pharaoh's heart and says, actually pursue them. So then we have the crossing of the Red Sea, the Sea of Reeds. And then some more. Oh, did it only do it? Oh, great. This is why I planned for this. Maybe. I have it on my phone. Here we go. Oh, it's in the same thing. Alright, so because my slides am I failing, this is all failing me at this time. We then have the bitter water, where they go through that. We also have Moses' song, Miriam's song, bitter water, the manna and the quail, the Amalekites fighting. This is great. And then I put those specific things because this is the water from the rock. This is the first time when he says to hit the rock. There's later a time when God says, speak to the rock. And Moses is mad and hits the rock again. It's great stuff. The Amalekites with his arms up in the air forever. I'm sharing all of this because these are all like Bible stories that I heard as a kid. And I'm like, I'm sure that some of us remember these at some point. But this is the context where we're at. So we get to Exodus 18, which is not a story that I ever remember being told as a kid. I have read it at some point, but I don't have like this picture. And so when this was one of the passages that Al said to speak on, I was like, oh, one, this relates to what I do as a profession. But two, I just was kind of new to me. I'm going to read El's translation of the second half of the chapter. Context is Jethro, Moses' father-in-law, returns from Midian, and with Moses' wife and 2 sons, and they come and they join. There's a really interesting burnt sacrifice that happens. Jethro acknowledges Yahweh as the true God, and there's this really interesting, fascinating communion that happens. And then, where we start, it literally says, the next day, it was the next day Moshe sat to judge the people. The people stood over Moshe from the morning until twilight. Moshe's father-in-law saw all that he did for the people. He said, what is this thing that you are doing for the people? Why are you sitting alone, and all the people stationed above you from morning until twilight? Moshe said to his father-in-law, for the people come to seek Elohim. For when they have a thing, they come to me. I judge between one and his neighbor. I cause them to know the engraved statutes of Elohim and his teachings. The father-in-law of Moshe said to him, no good, this thing that you are doing, like withered leaves from a vine, wilting you will wilt, both you and this people who are with you. For this is too heavy for you. You are not able to do it alone. Now, heed in my voice, oh that I might counsel you, that Elohim would be with you. Be for the people in front of God. You will bring the words to God. You will make engraved commandments, and the teaching shall shine bright for them. Make them know the path in which they will walk, and the doings that they will do. You will perceive with your inner vision all the people, men of force who fear Elohim, men of truth, hating profit, place over them commanders of thousands, of hundreds, of fifties, and tens. They will judge the people in all appointed times. It will be that every great thing they will bring to you, but every small thing they will judge. Be easy, for they will lift the burden with you from over you. If you do this thing, Elohim commands you, you will be able to stand. Also, all this people over his place will arrive in peace. Moshe heeded the voice of his father-in-law. He did all that he said. Moshe chose men of force from all of Israel. He gave them heads over the people, commanders of thousands, of hundreds, of fifties, and tens. They judged the people in every appointed time. The hard things they brought to Moshe, every small thing they judged. I don't ever remember thinking about any of this stuff. As I was reading through this, I was really, really struck by Jethro's words here about this is no good. The thing you are doing, like withered leaves from a vine, wilting you will wilt, both you and this people who are with you. I was reading through the NRSV translation beforehand, and this basically just says it'll wear you out. And then Al sent me her translation, and this picture of a wilting leaf that is on the still branch of just blowing away. Now, when I read this as a mental health professional, I thought, actually, one more slide. So let's go to the next slide, because I have questions. Now, I cannot answer these questions for you today. Maybe at some point, Elle, we can bring her back in. She can give us some context because she knows so much. But part of me thinks about what Moses would have thought hearing this from Jethro, this person who's been in his life for a long time, but is kind of coming in the middle of this and giving us pretty clear advice and direction. How did this make him feel? Did he feel anxious, embarrassed, or relief at the idea of doing this? Did he know that he was at risk? There's a lot of thoughts. I also have this kind of random question about, like, was Moses a controlling person? We see Moses taking things into his own hands multiple times. You know, his origin story before he returns to Midian, or before he goes to the desert, is him murdering an Egyptian and kind of taking justice into his own hands. We see, you know, we talked about the asking, you know, God telling him to speak to the rock and the water coming out, and him just being like, no, I'm going to strike it. And other things that he did that he just, yeah, were his own. And here he is being directed to delegate. That's challenging. So as a mental health professional, I have two themes that kind of came out. So one, asking for help, and two is boundaries. For some context, I am an Enneagram 2. So, this is, if you don't know anything about Enneagram 2s, we got some codependent tendencies, and we like to help and like to do things for ourselves. So, some of these things are personal lessons that I both have learned over time, but also things that I work a lot with my clients for. So, let's talk about asking for help. When I think about asking for help, there's a lot of different ways to ask for help. I tell my clients who are phenomenally successful humans, and I talk to them a lot about asking for help, but I paint a picture about there's a lot of different ways to ask for help. And I talk about moving a couch. Now, if I have a couch to move that I can't move on my own, I might say, hey Ryan, can you get that side of the couch? We'll pick this up together. I might go to someone who has lots of moving experience and say, hey Neil, you've moved couches before. What's the best way to move this couch? I might consult and have it figured out. I might also just delegate this task. Be like, all right, Lou, Tyler, I just need you guys to move this couch for me. That's also asking for help, passing it on. There's a lot of different ways that we can approach this idea of asking for help. More than, just say, hey, help me with this. This is really challenging. It's a really vulnerable process. I think it's really important to think about what asking for help can look like in our lives and what are some areas that we can ask for help. We're going to talk about that in the discussion time. Next, what I also see is that Moses receives advice from Jethro. We see this in the story. There's direction, which he gets direction to delegate. We also see back in Exodus 3, God providing help and support and direction for Moses, meeting him where he was at. Even some of those no's and some of those explanations of like, oh, I can't do this. God is like, no, yes, you can. And then he gets to the stutter, and God's like, fair point. You have a brother. Here's Aaron. I'm going to lift him up. I'm going to empower him to do this and support you in this process. Moses was a leader, but he didn't do it on his own. And it was really incredible. God also provided signs and miracles for them to perform to just highlight his power and his sovereignty in that moment. So, with that, boundaries. Boundaries, we've got a little bit more to say on. First, boundaries is a buzzword. It's one of those things that we hear a lot, and it's just kind of great therapy speak. We've all heard about it, and we're pretty familiar. There is a book that I really recommend called Set Boundaries, Find Peace by Nedra Glover Pullman. It's a really, really easy read. I read it literally the first day I was reading it, applied it. So it was just like, something happened, and I was like, oh, I get to do this. But it's really great. I can't recommend this enough. And this is a lot of what I pull some of the stuff with my clients, just in terms of boundaries in general, about if I got, kickback from this, I would have a couple dollars for it. I recommend it for both men, but just buy the book. This is her definition of boundaries. It's expectations and needs that help you feel safe and comfortable in your relationships. We often think about boundaries with other people, so we're going to talk a little bit about that. But also want to think about boundaries around our responsibilities and our calling, and where we say yes and where we can say no. That's a really challenging thing. With that, I think it's really important to realize that boundaries are always present, even if we haven't communicated them or even thought them out. One of my favorite examples about how we know that boundaries are always present is the boundaries around physical touch. Maybe you are a hugger. Maybe you are not. Even if you are a hugger, there may be some people who you're like, they're like, hey, let's get a hug. And you might have this like, ooh, I don't know if we're there. I don't know. That's not something you've ever thought about. That might not be a person you were like, oh, I've added them to my list of people I'm comfortable hugging. It's just there. You have that general sense of where you are and that closeness to them. They just exist. And boundaries develop over time. And they're different from relationship to relationship, from person to person. With that, I've got a couple illustrations that I think are really helpful. When I think about boundaries, I think about Venn diagrams, overlapping circles. With person A, person B, they are in a relationship because their circles are overlapping. They have that, part that they share. If you go to the same coffee shop every day and the same barista is there, and you say, hey Susan, how are your day? Great, Jeremiah, what's going on? Oh, just, you're just touching. There's that overlap that is there in that relationship. How big it gets is mutually consensual. It only takes one person to pull away. That's setting a boundary, and that's totally appropriate in that process. But what is on their side of the circle is not our responsibility. That's what I like to think about. What is my responsibility? What's not my responsibility? Additionally, when I think about boundaries, think about this concentric circle idea of how close we are. Actually, play it one more time. One of the best quotes that I ever heard about boundaries was that boundaries aren't about keeping others out, but they're about keeping ourselves in. So in that concentric circle image, in the middle, you've got a circle of J for Jeremiah. I'm the only one in that circle. And then outside of me, there's one boundary between people on my level 1 group, level 2, level 3. You can think of 4, 5, 6, 7, but it's hard to draw a lot of circles in PowerPoint. But yeah, the people in my 1 group, I'll go back. You're good. The people in my 1 group are people who over time I've fostered that connection with, who there's trust, and that's there. And there's only the need for one boundary. Now, that boundary may look different. Sometimes it's a 3-foot tall chain link fence. It's pretty diffuse. A lot can get through. Effort takes to get over, but it's a pretty clear line. Other people, it's a 4-foot brick wall. Where we're still very close, but there's some effort to get over it. If you spray a hose, it's going to stop it. Other people were really close. It's the line on the soccer field. You stay there, I stay here, but we're really affected by other people. And it takes time to identify that and clarify that and communicate that. And then level 2, level 3, level 4. The reason I bring this up is because it's helpful to think about when people share things with us. Do I internalize this? Where is this coming from? At my job, and I think in a lot of our jobs, we get random sources of feedback from random people. Hey, you should write your emails like this. Okay, person I've never met before. I can take a little bit of that. I can allow those boundaries to filter out and be like, okay, here is the piece of truth that's there, rather than saying, oh my God, I'm a terrible writer, no one should ever read my emails. Because sometimes that's where our brains jump to. Now, in this story, Exodus 3, we see Moses trying to set, not necessarily setting a boundary, but saying no. I think he was more avoiding his calling than that. But here, in the boundaries that Moses was setting, or at least being directed to set and eventually set, we see him saying no to things so that he can fulfill his calling in that. And better fulfill and act on what his calling was. If Moses spent all day, every day deciding the problems of the people, how would he have led them through the rest of the things? There's a lot that we don't necessarily know about his time, but we recognize that it wasn't the most efficient. Or even then, in Jethro's language, in his warning, it was going to lead him to burning out and wearing out. That is uncool. Go back, actually. With that, also in the concentric circles, you see that Jethro was someone that Moses trusted, someone from one of those inner circles that was there. On top of it, while Moses acted on his curiosity, God was there and he listened to that and allowed, to be influenced by God in Exodus 3, through God's convincing support and helping him embrace his calling in that time. Which leads us back to these two original messages that I have. We see that Moses asked for help, and before it became an issue. I have a client the coworker, she talks about how it's easier to prevent burnout than heal burnout. And there's a lot of things that we can do in terms of our calling and our relationship with God and our walk to make sure that we are staying healthy and saying yes to the things that are important. And again, our personal well-being affects others. I think that's the other part of that message. This wasn't just a warning to Moses saying like, hey, you're doing too much, and if you do, you're not going to be okay. But he looked at the systemic understanding of if you aren't okay, these people who you are leading are also not going to be okay. And I think that is a really just important thing to recognize that our well-being, our care for ourselves supports other people. So some summary points, take-home messages. Delegation is taking care of yourself and the people that you care for. Exploring what you can say no to within your calling is healthy and normal. It's a challenge though. Part of the discussion we're going to talk about is how do we determine what is appropriate for us to say yes to, and what should we say no to in our calling. But I do think that's where God's sovereignty and grace comes in quite a bit. And identifying your boundaries and relationships can help us better fulfill our callings. One of my favorite things, one of the lines that I pulled from the Set Boundaries Find Peace book, Nedra talks about when you say yes to something, you are saying no to everything else. For example, if I go to a restaurant and I say, I'm going to get this item, I am saying no to all of the other items, unless my wife and I are having a little tradesy thing. I get this, I get this, and double up. But we're saying no to a lot of things. But also, when we say no to things that are beneficial to say no to, it gives us the opportunity to say yes to other things. And I think that's really important to embrace and pursue, particularly in our relationship with God, particularly for those of us who are still sorting through some of our healing and explorations from a lot of past. There's a lot of stuff I know in my life that I've said no to that I don't necessarily want to participate in when it comes to my faith. But at the same time, there's a lot of grace to be gentle in that exploration and say, well, no to that portion, but yes to this portion, because that can be a really powerful experience for a lot of us. So with that, we're going to have some discussion questions. Those are in the Slack. We're going to go ahead and wrap up our sermon time with a song. I'll pray, and we'll have the band come back up. So, Father God, thank you so much for this opportunity to be in community with one another. Help us to explore our calling and our relationships with that calling, and how we want to engage with the world around us, how we want to pursue your holiness and your sanctification and your grace as we discuss what it's appropriate to say yes to and what we can say no to. God, thank you so much for this time. We love you and praise you in Jesus' name.